Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Charlotte Jones. Charlotte Jones has 25 plus years of leadership experience and has been the driving force in leading and transforming teams across various domains, including HR, talent acquisition, diversity, communication, and marketing. She's worked for Lockheed Martin, Stanley Black & Decker, Indeed, and is currently the director of associate experience and DEI at Rite Aid. Charlotte, thanks for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me, Chris.
So I think we originally met, I was giving a talk, and I think you attended it and asked some really great questions in the session, which is the power of asking great questions. So I was like, man, I need to talk to this person. And I remember getting off of the training and I was like, I need to look up who she is. And then I saw your background, I saw your profile. We got on the call and had a conversation. And I just thought, more people need to have the opportunity to be able to learn from you, and specifically around employer brand and this idea of what is an employer brand, how does it work? Because I think that people are often aware of like what a brand is, like what does it mean to have grape nuts, and we need to do branding to be able to sell a product. That was the only one that like people would know I had in my cupboard right now that I could come out as an example. But we think of Apple, we think of the NFL, we think of Volvo or whatever it is, and we think of a brand and then doing marketing to sell a brand, which we buy a product once. But when you think of employer brand, you're having somebody sign up to spend the majority of their life, right, in days at a place. And so I'm curious, Charlotte, how do you explain what an employer brand is and why it's important?
Yes, very good question. So first, I have to say that regardless of what you call it, because there are many names for it, you look at job descriptions now, you look at titles, it can be anything from employer brand, employee brand, talent brand. It is your brand. It is part of your company brand. But specific to what talent, candidates or prospective employees, or even the public, what their perceptions are, what their beliefs and thoughts and feelings are about working. The keyword is working for a particular company, at a particular company. So employer brand includes perceptions about the leaders at the company, how they're leading, what they're saying, what they're doing, the culture and what it feels like to work there every day, the diversity at the company, treatment of employees, what you get in return, such as the perks or discounts and pay, the benefits, work-life balance, if they're hybrid, if they're remote, if it's all, in the office, the pay, again, the benefits, all of those are components of an employer brand. And that's what the employer brand truly is made of. It's made of individual experiences, and it is based off of individual experiences. It could be also an ad campaign, something creative, something that you may have seen on a commercial or a job ad. It could be word of mouth, something that you heard your neighbor friends say about the company and what they know about the company and what they've experienced at a company, or something that they read on Glassdoor or Indeed. It really is the overall reputation.
Well, and you see it, and I think I do an engagement clinic program, and one of the things I do is I send people out to research. If somebody goes and research your company online, what are they going to find?
Yes. Yes.
And this is what the company does. And I go out and I go look on Glassdoor. And one company I work on, the CEO had 100% approval rating. Another company I just worked on, they still had the previous CEO on Glassdoor, and that was 2 years ago.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And his rating was up there. Mm-hmm. So, you have all this stuff that's out there, but who's responsible inside a company for employer brand?
Yes, everyone. Really, everyone is responsible for employer brand, from the CEO to the CHRO to the CFO, down to the VPs, the employees, recruiters. Everyone has a responsibility, and everyone really should know what, if they had an elevator speech that they needed to talk to, whether they were going back to their alma mater and they were speaking at their college, right? Or they are talking to a neighbor and they're interested in referring talent, or the person is wanting to work for that company. They should have some type of statement, elevator speech, and everybody should be equipped with that. And that's one of the things that you could do during an activation of your employee value proposition, is to give speaking points to your teams, to your leaders, anyone that's going out there to recruit. As many times where consumers can be your employees. So in a business to consumer business, you want to also equip your sales team and your marketing team with that language. So it really can be anyone within the company that owns, that has accountability to promote it. But in terms of owning it like a department,
Yeah, and this is where I want to like, Charlotte, so zoom back, like let's go and walking to a company, and like some of these bigger brands that you've worked with, they understand it. And then you have these smaller companies where, well, the idea of employer brand, right? Like they may have a marketing department, they may have an HR department, but they don't quite understand it. So how do you, if you're going into an organization, there's some that they have this defined brand and they know that this is something that they need to do. How do you get people to understand what employer brand is and why it's important, and get some of those leaders who are maybe hyper focused on the sales and the results of the company, but not thinking about the important role of branding themselves as an employer?
So so you're asking sort of why is it important? The business case for it, right?
Well, I know there's the business case for it, but how do you get people who don't understand internally the importance of employer brand? So I was thinking about, you were just talking about the sales folks are going out to meet with clients or go to something where they're going to have an exhibit. And how do you get them to understand they're not just exhibiting the product, but they're also exhibiting the organization as an employer? How do you get the CEO to understand that when they're speaking or when they're presenting at a conference, they're not just presenting their products, but they're also presenting themselves as an employer? How do you get people to get that and understand that, and to build a brand when it may not be there? And I know that's a huge question, but I'd love to get your insights on that.
Yeah, so partnerships across the board, across all levels, across all functions and disciplines, those partnerships are going to be key to really teaching and educating. And it is a continuous journey in teaching and educating everyone about the employer brand, because you can tell someone on day one, this is the reason why it's important, and you've got to use these consistent branding. Just like if you were in marketing, you need to use consistent branding so people can remember, and they could be memorable to your audience, right? But on day two, there's a lot of other priorities that are much more important, and it's forgotten. So it's a continuous journey. You have to continue to really build the relationships and speak to the importance, the critical nature of the employer brand. And that is that you're going to continue to sell this, and here's why. You have consumers that can be employees or prospective employees, and vice versa. And any negativity that touches your employer brand, so that means what I just talked about earlier, you can have an issue with diversity at a company. There could be discrimination. There could be someone that had a bad experience with a leader and they put it out there on social, right? They could say the benefits at this company are the worst, and I don't understand why they're not giving us benefits or coverage on particular, areas of health, right? And that can get out there, and that can have a negative impact on attraction. And of course, as we all know, attraction is costly when you're losing employees and you've got high attrition and turnover. You're paying to acquire talent. And so to make it easy or better, more efficient for a company, you have to have an employer brand, a well-known employer brand, a positive reputation as an employer to get talent. Because there's companies out there, as you know, like the Apples and the Microsofts and the Meta, Facebooks of the world, people want to go work there, right? Lockheed Martin was another example when I worked at Lockheed Martin. People are just scrambling to get to these companies.
How do I get in? How do I get in? How do I get a job? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's because they have this employer brand, this strong employer, and that's what we say, a strong employer brand, because it's not much work. Still used to have to manage that employer brand and create those consistencies, but they have such a strong employer brand that they don't really have to compete
Yeah.
that much for talent as would a smaller organization hiring for the same talent. So that's the reason why the employer brand, just keep giving those examples. And what really worked for me in building the business case across all those relationships was doing the research and the competitive analysis. And if we were in a war for talent, that's what I need to show. That's what I needed to show consistently, is that we're not getting the engineers, we're not getting the pharmacists, we're not getting the candidates that we need to build the funnel, a diverse funnel of candidates, to be competitive in the marketplace and connecting that with the bottom line.
I love that. And I love that you just kind of tied it into some of the different things you had to market and some of the different roles you've been in. And that idea, I was just talking with a company that are going to pay a search firm, $100,000 to get one candidate.
Yes.
Opposed to having a list of 5 candidates
Yes.
that are qualified applying to you and that you can negotiate with them because they want to work for your company. Right. It's, am I going to push and am I going to incentivize people to come to us, or is who we are going to be the incentive that draws people in?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then you're giving people the numbers to say, okay. And I'm guessing you have to speak differently to every single department that you're selling this to. Yeah. HR is going to get it one way, marketing is going to get it another way. And one thing that was interesting, I was part of a best place to work study for, 3 years or 4 years. Actually, I just did another one this year. I was a judge on Inspiring Workplaces.
Oh, okay.
And you can see that the best companies, they get that. And they are thinking of the messaging, they're thinking of the stories, and they tell their story over and over and over again. So how do you, when you're going in, how do you coordinate your efforts? Because I know you talked about the intersectionality of employer brand across organizations. How do you get those different parties involved? How do you help them understand their role? How do you get them excited about what you can do, and what are some of the things that have worked for you?
Yes, so there's definitely, that's the one key learning that I've had, was mastering the intersectionality of the employer brand, and really talking about how you connect that employer brand to all of the tangible outcomes. From what are the goals, and understanding, number one, understanding the goals of each one of those disciplines, each one of those organizations. From employee engagement, what is their goal? Their goal is to reduce turnover, to increase engagement, to improve the employee experience. And once I understand the goals of each one of the organizations, for example, marketing is, of course, in marketing and sales, and improve sales, right? Increase sales. And understanding each one of their areas and speaking to that. So for employee engagement, the reason why there's such an intersectionality there is telling the employee story, and allowing and enabling the employee to be able to tell the employer brand story. So if you had a value proposition, one of the things that worked for me was working with employee engagement, getting the data around the experience, the employee engagement score, whether it's a diversity index score, or it could be, the net promoter score of that survey that goes out annually or, quarterly, and understanding the impact that we're going to make with the engagement of employees with the employee storytelling. So getting stories and telling those stories and promoting them on social, that's a huge impact, not just for the company, but for the employee themselves, because they are promoting themselves. When you do that, they're getting promotion, right? They're getting promotion on social, on the career
for everybody.
Right. And so that gets them involved with showcasing to their network, showcasing those stories to their network, and being a part of your, LinkedIn or your Facebook or, your social accounts, your blog or your employee network, and getting those stories out to their networks and to their networks. And that's expanding. I've worked at companies where we didn't have a budget for paid social, but what really worked and was much more profitable, or I should say productive, and had three times as
It was profitable too when it
profitable,
worked.
right? Because it worked to get your employees to share out content, and that's employee advocacy. So there's a connection there from a finance standpoint, and working with finance and knowing you don't have a budget, and finance wants to cut costs and expenses. Here's another way to get the story out, and that's working with your employees, partnering with them, having them share their stories out with their networks. And when they're sharing their stories, there's going to be a link, for example, for recruitment marketing purposes, a link to a page of jobs, right? Posted jobs. And this is where recruitment marketing comes into play. And
I mean, I have to share on this one as you're sharing this. Like, I personally, when my cousin, who was really great on the tech field, was looking for a job, I was like, you need to go to HubSpot. And you need to go to HubSpot because I have been following people at HubSpot telling stories about how great their experience is. I've never worked there. I've never even talked to anybody, but I've seen so many posts from HubSpot employees. And Katie Burke, who I think is their chief people officer. I've seen this stuff so much that when she was applying and she's in Boston, I'm like, you need to apply at HubSpot.
Yes. And that's what the employer brand is. That is the definition of an employer brand.
And they're not spending a cent on that other than the employee time. And the messages are beautifully crafted. The pictures are there. And that right there is selling who they are. And there's much more pull than there is push to get people in.
Yes. Yes.
So how do you, when you've got all these parties, the thing that stuck out to me when you were just sharing that was that how much intentionality you have in understanding each party's needs is, okay, I understand that marketing has certain needs. I understand that sales has certain needs. I understand that the C-suite has certain needs. And then you define it, and then you kind of, it sounds like you put together resources for each group to remove the effort to help them support your mission for them to do that. So what are some of the things that have really worked for you in doing that?
Yeah, so I would say initially and early on in my career, I learned to have some type of forum. And I called it different things. It could be, an integrated partnership meeting. It could be a committee or talent attraction committee. It could be the recruitment marketing council. I called it all sorts of different names, but consistently at almost every organization I had a group of people, and brought together a group of people, whether it was on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on the culture, and had them come together to share what their initiatives are around employee experience or employer brand, and then what their needs were. And then from a recruitment marketing employer brand standpoint, I was there to guide them, to provide them with resources, to understand what resources I need to build for that year or the following year. I was connecting people. In different areas to make sure there's consistency, because that was the biggest, I would say, pain point around employer brand and a corporate standpoint, because you might have a lot of segmented brands, a lot of segmented business areas that want to go off and do their own thing. And we really wanted to, from a corporate standpoint, bring everything together in a consistent way for external views and perceptions, right? So it was that consistency and speaking about it and providing consistent resources at a corporate level so that everybody can use. So creating a resource center. So I have a resource center in addition to having those meetings, and having frequent touch points. That was key to having frequent touch points.
What do you mean by that?
So whether it was a group of us meeting or if it was one-on-one, just reaching out and saying, on a regular basis. And a regular basis could be every 2 weeks, depending on if they're in recruitment and they have constant activities and events and conferences going on and they need resources, or it is once a month or quarterly to showcase what the results are from all of the recruitment activity. Because I was
Okay,
also,
pause on that. And
yeah,
now I could see the emphasis in how you said it. To
yes,
show the results, why is that important? And
yeah.
what does that look like?
So results were, I mean, of course, it depends on the culture. Most corporate cultures, of course, it really looking at data and looking at the return on investment of all the activity is critical.
Hmm.
And especially if you have a large budget, they want to know what this budget did that you know that you used and what you got out of it in terms of, again, impacting the bottom line. And so for talent acquisition is it would be looking at that funnel of, how many people did you bring in to apply and where did they come from? So tracking all of those recruitment marketing activities from, with using QR codes, using links on pages, using job boards. I mean, I've used some really great tools out there from recruitment marketing agencies that can track behavior of candidates clicking. And of course, candidate behavior is all over the place. You can click on a Glassdoor job and not apply right away. You can then go back to the career site, hours later or days later and apply. So it's not a linear line of candidate activity, but it's just tracking to see what were the points of advertising that the employer brand touched, and then what was the result from that, from the top of the funnel to prospective candidates that maybe viewed the ads,
Hmm.
to those that actually applied, to those that were qualified applicants, so they passed the basic qualifications in the ATS, the applicant tracking system, to those that were interviewed, offered, and hired. So hired is typically the last point of measurement or metric that we measured. And then we also looked at things like candidate experience newsletters, alumni networks, and referrals, right? Referrals, employee referrals, and impacting the employee referral by providing uh, employer brand messaging and messaging through that platform, the employer referral platform. And then you cannot forget talent network or I say talent network / CRM, candidate relationship management, email communication. So it wasn't just the full funnel of data, but there were other activities going on, including social media. So social media can, of course, be a part of that, but then social media also has its qualitative measures. So looking at both quantitative and qualitative, really important to look at data from a holistic standpoint to measure employer brand, because in some cases, employer brand is a soft marketing tactic. And with soft marketing, you have to look at qualitative results, not just quantitative. It's how you made someone feel, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you look at the candidate experience and the data from candidate experience surveys.
Oh, the hardest thing I'm having with interviewing you is that time you're talking, I have like 7 questions that come into my mind as you're sharing it, but I don't want to
Yeah,
interrupt what you're saying.
yeah.
So what stood out to me is that you were talking about all these amazing measures, these things that we're looking for, which I know for a smaller company that may be overwhelming to think about that. And for a bigger company where you have the team to be able to do that, okay, great. We are hiring for a lot of positions. And so we need to get people into that funnel and we can track that. And I was also thinking as you were sharing that, that's the first side of the funnel for the employer brand. This is getting people to our company. Now, what is the role of employer brand and keeping and engaging the people who are there already?
Yeah, so empowering employees to share authentic stories. And it really is about activating the employer brand and like, making it easy for employees to participate and share their story. So one of the things that I did initially at one of my previous employers was standing up a site. It wasn't so much a part of the intranet site, it was adjacent to the intranet site. And it was full of stories, employee stories that were formally and professionally produced. And then there were stories where people could do on their phone, right? Just a video that they could do on their phone. We used another platform for that, but just making it easy and providing guidance. So the guidance was there on that site, examples of stories, and then a form, just a form to say, if you don't want to do a video, you can just type your story in here. And I did that, I duplicated that at other companies. But it's just a form that asks, what story would you like to tell? And provide them with some categories or some guidance, I would say, of how they can tell their story or what category they'd like to tell their story, whether it be around, their leaders and working with great teams, or the technology or the innovations they create, or it could be, the diversity or the belonging, the inclusion that they're experiencing in their role, in their job. So give them those options and guide them with some type of story that they, kind of story starters is what we call them. And through that effort, I was able to collect, hundreds of stories within a year at one of my previous companies, technology companies. And it was fascinating. Didn't realize that was going to be such an impact on employees, and they really took to it, and they wanted to share. A lot of people want to share their story, and it was great to see that. So that was a result. Of course, that was a quantitative result, but it was also qualitative, and it impacted the experience so much, because they're not only seeing other stories, but they're able to participate in telling their own story and then sharing them out on social media, sharing them internally. And it's really important to, whatever you're saying externally, you're also saying internally. That consistency is so important.
I remember a company that I worked with. I remember walking in on the first day and trying to figure out, I'm like, what do they even do here? Because on the walls, they just had old art. It was random stuff. And I'm like, but all of their work was around employment and having people advance in their careers. It was kind of a job center. I was like, why aren't there stories of people on the wall? Like, we have these extraordinary stories of people that we've helped go from earning like $5, but $10 an hour. I don't want to date how far back it was. To like move up from like $20,000 a year to like $70,000 a year once they got a nursing degree. And I was like, why don't we have these stories on the wall? Why don't you see these? And it's like, this gives people purpose. And I love what you shared, because I think that we often forget that people don't feel seen when we're talking to them. They feel seen when they're sharing with us.
Yes.
And that idea of asking people. And I love what you shared about, I made it easy for people to share their stories and giving people those questions, because I think it's that, I find this in my work, is that there are so many great conversations that can be had. And when people start sharing, they get more excited about where they are. And one thing I'm curious is, how do you engage the customer in talking about the people? Because many times here we are in a service industry. How do we engage the customer in telling the employer brand story? Because the customer is the one who's experiencing the great employee experience, the happy employee who served them and supported them. Have you found ways to be able to engage the customer or the people experiencing the service in that employer brand?
Yes, we actually, here at Rite Aid, we actually do that. And because we are a consumer organization, and we have frontline employees that are very passionate about serving their communities, serving individuals, particularly the pharmacy. So many wonderful stories, and how they helped someone in their health and their wellness, how they were able to reach, someone through language, through just kindness, right? And just being concerned and observing people and listening to people. So many great stories. And so we do feature them on our intranet,
Mhm.
and we also feature them on our social. So I've had just recently someone that I featured on Women's History Month wanted to also share a story with me, and she was just so passionate about it. And I just love the passion and the um, the purpose that comes from the stores and the pharmacies. And
Mm.
that when they help someone, that is what makes their uh, their lives satisfying, because they're helping someone. And so when you hear that story, that just, it brightens my day. It really does. It lights up my whole day. And that's what we want to share. And even to motivate our customers to come back to our stores, and to motivate others that are maybe interested in a pharmaceutical career, or a pharmacy career, or interested in impacting health and wellness in their communities. So it does go both ways. I think it's kind of a circle of, we're here to help our communities. Our communities are also here to give us feedback and to help us evolve as an organization. And it's a circle. It's a circle of life there. And just creating, again, going back to health and wellness, and creating whole health for life, providing whole health for life.
Yeah. Charlotte, one thing that I think about a lot is I think about that culture is a conversation,
Mhm.
and it gets generated by the conversations that we have. And something that stands out for me is that employer brand is a conversation.
Yeah.
And what I get is that you're a person, and the way that you think of it, what I've taken from our conversations before and now, is that you're a person who's facilitating a conversation first, and helping people define the conversation that we're having, and
Mhm.
getting clarity on who we are and what we do and what we stand for. And then you're keeping people in that conversation by asking questions, by inviting voices, by lifting voices, by amplifying voices, and then by sharing stories so people see the links between what's going on for everything that we're out to accomplish.
Mhm. Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. It's a full story. It's a full holistic story of how we all impact each other, how we all influence each other. So absolutely, it's definitely a story, and it's a story that we also want to be realistic and authentic. So it's not just us pulling together a message. It is a data-driven message, and it has to be data-driven, based on real employee stories and experiences. So when you talk about the employee value proposition and gathering that message, it starts with understanding our employees and understanding what they want from an employer, what they experience from an employer, uh, what they actually get, right, from the employer, and what they give, because it's also a give and get. A lot of messages and EVPs are about what the employee is giving, right? So that's why you have to bring those employee stories in, is because they're going to talk about what they're giving and then what they're getting in return.
Interesting. So
Mhm.
what would be, Charlotte, what would be your, okay, I have two separate questions I want to ask here. So for a manager
Mhm.
who's running their own team, what is their role in your mind in that employer brand? And why is it important for that individual manager with a team of anywhere from 5 to 20 people? What do you see their role is in employer brand? And what are the things that they should be doing? And why is it important to them?
Yes. So typically in an employer brand or messaging infrastructure, you have the overall company goals, right? You might have the diversity mission or vision. You'll have the values of the company. Then you'll have why employees would want to work for the company. So that employee value proposition, what the employees are giving back. So that's kind of the credo, what they should be giving to the company, or sort of kind of competencies or values that they should be giving back, right?
Mhm.
And it's a full infrastructure, like a messaging infrastructure. And so managers should be aware of that. Number one, they should be aware of all of those pieces, even if it's not formally created within a company. They should all know what the mission, and they should live it. They should live the vision, the diversity, equity and inclusion and belonging vision,
Mhm.
and objectives. They should be understanding what the values and living those values, as well as the EVP, the employee value proposition, and understanding that hierarchy
Mhm.
and the intersection, right, of all of that.
Mhm.
And then they should ensure that as a manager, as a leader, that they are creating and mirroring those beliefs, those values, those missions. They should be mirroring that in how they manage. And so pretty much whoever they're talking to, whether it's an employee, a customer, a supplier, they should be they should exemplify that brand, right? And everyone,
Why?
why?
Yeah.
Because if they do not, and say, for example, a candidate comes in and they see the job description, they see all this great language, they see all these wonderful stories that are being told, and they get into the role and they experience the very opposite of what they've heard all this about the company, and they experience the very opposite. You're going to have turnover. They may leave within 90 days. They may leave within a year. You're going to get negative sentiment on your employee experience survey. You're going to get negative sentiment on the external social sentiment site. The reputation is going to go down. The word of mouth is going to, the positivity about your company is going to go down. There is a direct connection with experiences and the experiences that you have as an employee and the reputation you have as an employer. So those are directly connected. And you don't want to have, of course, you don't want to have a negative reputation, because that may also, as I mentioned earlier, impact your company brand because of the social political activities that are going on right now. If you could call it, wokeness, or, understanding of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
People do not want to work for a company that does not stand for something. That's a lot of double negatives there. People want to work for a company that stands for something, that does what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
So, and it's very prevalent now that employees will leave because the company doesn't have the values that they're preaching.
It's
That
really
the
interesting.
company, right, that the company doesn't follow their values, follow the mission, right, or practice what they preach. So, and
You
that's
say that everyone belongs here, everybody's welcome, but then we see a story about a customer who was not treated that way, or an employee who wasn't treated that way. I did a video recently, depends on when this comes on, and it was about the difference between money and purpose. And it was interesting. One of the comments that someone said is that money needs to be there because I need to have that base to be able to live my life. And because my argument is that nobody's motivated by money, they're motivated by what money allows them to do.
yes,
And then purpose is that beauty on the top of it that has us show up beyond the money, beyond the meeting our needs. And our job should always empower us to live the lives that we want to live
yes,
outside of work, and then support us to have those lives inside of work as well. And a
yes,
person's comment afterwards says, the money is that allows me to meet those needs, and that purpose gives me that fulfillment. And then the line was, as a person of color, I'm also looking for the place where I'm going to be least discriminated against.
yes, yes, yes.
And the wording of least discriminated against was that I'm going to get discriminated against. It's going to be there, but I'm going to go to the place where I feel like I'm going to have least discriminated against, which made me sad to even hear that.
Yes.
But then at the same time is like, hey, do I show up?
Mhm.
And all this kind of talk about, like, the horrible thing that's happened around the DEI conversation of it going one way or going the other, to belonging is just belonging.
Mhm.
And how do we create an environment where I show up, and if I see this and I see that people have this experience, and then I show up and then my manager mimics that, and then I do feel seen for my value, for my contributions, then those are the places I'm going to stick around. But then if I get, someone's told me too, it's like I got in the door and I got 3 red flags within the first 48 hours, I was already applying for other positions.
Yes, absolutely. And I've had to make those decisions as well. I do research, about on companies before I've interviewed with them in the past. And if I see a lot of discrimination lawsuits, I will pass it up. If
Yeah.
I look at their website and I see the actual employees, not stock photography, and I don't see it, I will pass it up. So if I have a choice, I will pass it up. So that's a key decision maker on a lot of people, and not just people of color.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Okay. Let's pause for a second because you froze.
Oh, I think we froze.
And just, oh, there you are. You're back. Oh,
Yeah.
really good thing you just shared. Okay. We heard it there. Okay. So Charlotte, I want to just wrap up with just what are your, if you were, so let me wrap up with just one last question here. What would you say for an organization that may not be so advanced on employer brand? What are some of those first steps that you'd recommend them taking? What are some of those kind of key actions? If you're saying, hey, you know what, you really want to start here, and here are 3 concrete things that I'd recommend you do right from the start to just get moving on getting people to be adopting and understanding the idea of employer brand.
Yes. I would definitely, number one, leverage external partnerships. And here's why. And even if you have, it could be a recruiting agency, right? It could be a recruitment marketing agency. It could be your marketing department's agency. And they may have an operational arm to support you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd leverage that. And so you may not have your own agency to work with, or your own recruitment marketing team or employer brand team to work with, but you can leverage your existing suppliers, whether they're it could be a talent management agency, right, that you work with, and they could give you some best practices. So always leverage them because they're just not tactical. They do have strategic arms that they can support you with critical thinking, with stations. So nurture those relationships. Absolutely.
What would you ask them to do for you if you have
Yeah.
a budget and you say, okay, I've got access to these firms? Because most times it's gonna be like, just help us get people in the door.
Yes.
Being from the employer brand side, what would you say? Hey, I would love to get help. If we're going to invest some money, I would love to have you just help us figure out X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So one of the questions I typically would ask would be, what are your other clients doing, right, around XYZ? And that could be, what are they doing around attracting talent, or attracting women engineers, right? Or
I love the
women,
specific, like,
right? These are actual questions that I've asked. So what are they doing? And could you just give me, I understand you can't give me names because you have contracts in place, but if you could just give me, a general approach to what they're doing. Or do you think I can talk to one of them? Do you think you can connect me with one of them? And so I can talk to them. And so now you're doing your own primary research, and you're coming up with different ideas and strategies to put together and customize for your own culture. It could be, working with your marketing agency and saying, from a consumer standpoint, you've got all these consumers in the database. Do you think that we could maybe ask them some questions? Can you help me with pulling together some primary research or focus group questions so we can ask them what they think about our business as an employer? Those are real questions, right? And real partnerships that you can have with your agencies or existing agencies, and really tapping into the power of them as thought leaders, because they do have the research, and they do have the clients, and they do have research. So, and articles that they've written, whether it's in a blog, or they do white papers, right? They do have those. So leverage them. You see them sending you white papers, ask them, how'd you get this information? Could I leverage some of that data? And that data is going to help you build your strategy. And in terms of employee value proposition and getting the actual value proposition of your employees, that doesn't cost much. You can actually do your own research with your employees, whether it be from, SurveyMonkey or a tool similar to SurveyMonkey, and collect questions. There's resources out there that you can search and get those questions for employee value proposition to assess what they think about your benefits, what they think about your work-life balance and leadership, and pulling that all together with your employee engagement survey data, and even conducting focus groups, getting some small groups together based on your critical talent segments. You want to hire engineers, you talk to about 15 engineers. If it's different locations, you talk to 15 engineers per country. There's very low cost to pulling together, unless you have to pay for their time. There's very low cost to pulling together your employees and asking them questions to find out about your realistic employee value proposition.
Shard, I love it. And it kind of brings us full circle. You and I met because you attended a free training that I was speaking at. And what I get is that you're a person who learns and you keep on learning. And then what I also got from that is I was like, oh, that completely makes sense that that's how we connected, because all the ideas you shared was, you know what, just reach out and ask this question. Invite this person's expertise. Look for the free resources they have if you don't have those and you do have access to them. Do internal focus groups. Ask people questions. Invite their stories into the dialogue. Bring people together to discuss the ways that we could do this. Pull out their stories. Bring those stories together, and then you have the resources. And then what you shared in this little masterclass that you just gave us here was then understand who all the parties that you're working with within your organization, what their needs are, what their desires, what their goals are, and then figure out how you can support them to have this be a win-win situation by getting them the data they need and pulling the data from them to get everybody rowing in the same direction to build the kind of brand that draws people in and makes sure that people stick around for the long term.
Absolutely.
Charlotte, thank you so much. And for reaching out today, and for thank you so much for having the conversation today. And well, if people have questions, is it okay for them to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yes, absolutely. Please connect with me. It's Charlotte Jones, and it's pretty easy to find. So just find me, Charlotte Jones, on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thanks for connecting today and for taking the time to have the conversation, your expertise.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.